Hello, and welcome to the Growth and Thriving podcast, where we celebrate the lives of people who have overcome great hardship and adversity and examine the tools and techniques by which we create lives of thriving. I'm your host, Dr. Jerry Sunshine Novak, the biker psychologist, and today I am super excited for my guest, who's going to share her story with us. I normally, when I introduce a podcast, I would a podcast guest anyway, I give them a big introduction about who they are and what they've been through. And I'm hesitant to do that with Rochelle because I want her to share her story. But if you follow any of my social media for the past week and a half or so, you will have seen little clips of her in the gym. I'm lucky enough to be her fitness coach. And I've been putting out little teasers about this episode of the podcast coming out. So you may have some insight. I was very privileged to become Rochelle's fitness coach and part of her life a little over a year ago. It was maybe 13 months ago, something like that. And it has been, like I said, a privilege for me to be around her. Rochelle is, as far as I'm concerned, a person who just sort of radiates strength and warmth, and is somebody who just leaves everyone and everywhere better than she found them. And so I think that Rochelle is a remarkable human being and really has a profound story to share. So with no further ado, I will introduce my friend and client, Rochelle Wright. Rochelle, welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jerry. That was quite an introduction. I really appreciate it. And I feel honored to be on your podcast show. I'm a little nervous, but I've shared my story before. So It'll be organic this time, as the times I've shared it before has just been in different settings. So sure. I didn't tailor it specific for your show, so we'll see what you get.
Oh, good. I like it when it's organic. It makes it for its own flow, and I like it to be its own thing, right? I don't want you to fit your story into any kind of particular format. So what I would invite you to do, Rochelle, is just kind of wherever you want to start from. Maybe we will get into some of the ways in which you create for yourself a life of thriving. One thing I didn't say in the introduction that does bear mentioning is, I have a model, I guess, that I work from for helping people thrive. And there are certain tools in that model. And some of those tools are sort of mental or emotional, interpersonal things like mindfulness and self-compassion and growth mindset, things of that sort. Some of these things are physical, like fitness and nutrition and hydration. And then I also talk quite a bit about financial thriving, not necessarily that everybody needs to be wealthy, but that not having financial stressors in the way of thriving makes life easier. And you're a rare person that I know who seems to really put effort and practice into all of those. Most of the people I deal with sort of specialize in one area, And so you seem to have taken a really holistic approach to creating the life you want. So with that said, I'll turn it over to you to share however you'd like to share.
Well, thank you. And that just what you just shared brings me to a topic of balance. How important it is to have balance in our lives. And I was way out of balance even longer than 2 years ago, but I had a very traumatic event take place 2 years ago, August 13th. But before I jump into that, I just want to give the listeners just a kind of a little idea of what Rochelle looked like leading up to that. I appeared on the surface as a very happy, very confident, very organized, very together woman. Um, I was highly skilled at being a people pleaser and a
Mhm.
perfectionist. And with that being said, that lifestyle gets very exhausting at times.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize my life was out of balance. I had some indicators, though, leading up to that in previous years. Um, for example, like when my husband and I first met 33 years ago, we both chose a lifestyle we both had addictive personalities, that we were not going to drink. We were not going to use addictive substances. And we lived our lives pretty much like that for 10 years. And we had children, raised a family, and uh, year 2000, somebody gave us a bottle of champagne because, it was the millennium. And we're like, what do we do with this? Well, we popped it open. And I found early on back then that was my stress release for um, dealing with all this energy inside of me that I tried to portray, the person I tried to portray. And kept it under control pretty good for many years until it got out of balance. So I'm not going to go into all that detail, but just as a backdrop, I have had my issues with alcohol. I went through AA program, got sober, um, learned everything I needed to know. That I had it down to a T, and quit going to meetings, and I had my life under control. Um, Fast forward or go back 10 years ago, I was doing pretty good with my sobriety, and I had a few relapses. So there were some indicators in the background that Rochelle was out of balance, and
Mhm.
I didn't see it, but I was always able to get my drinking under control, get back to being the great mom, the superstar neighbor, the great wife, and the excellent employee. And that's what everybody thought of me. And I worked very hard to live up to um, that false facade of myself. Um, so 2 years ago, the perfect storm started brewing. Um, Also, let me mention that I had become a secret drinker in those years
Mhm.
because of shame. Um, the shame did not fit well with the person I was trying to portray. So I became a secret drinker, and I could go months, I could go years without drinking, but if there was an opportunity to sneak away, just kind of get that warm buzz, let the dust, everything just relax, I would seize it, and then I'd be back to being sober. Well, 2 years ago, the perfect storm started brewing, and I had a trip scheduled back to Illinois, where my dear mama was residing. She hadn't been around anyone for almost 2 years because of the lockdowns with COVID and all that. So I was going back to visit her. And in my stinking thinking mind, I was like, well, I can go back, relax, no one will know, tip a few beers, and visit my mom and come home, and everything would be great. Well, I didn't even get out of the airport without downing 2 beers. I got to my mom's. I couldn't stay at her place because of the regulations still with COVID. So I had my own hotel room and checked in and got myself something to drink at the liquor store. And I'm not kidding you, within 3 days, my drinking went from 0 to 90, 100,000. I couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
And it was very scary for me because I'd always been very much in control. And my daughter discovered that I had been drinking during a FaceTime call, being sloppy, seeing something in the background, whatever. So the cat was out of the bag. I was very ashamed, very ashamed. And so my drinking escalated. And next thing I knew, I was not wanting to come home. I was not wanting to come home to face the reality of everybody knowing that it was a failure, that I had disappointed and upset everybody with my actions. So I decided the best way out was to try to commit suicide. And I pondered that for 3 days and thought about which way would be the best way to go. And I was not clear-minded enough to even think about asking for help because with the shame, it just caused me to drink more. So there were just some train tracks right next to my hotel. I heard the trains every hour. And I decided I wasn't going to go home. I had to check out of my hotel room. I was supposed to leave that day. I was supposed to go hang out with my mom. And instead, I drove down to the train tracks, waited for the next train, and I just laid down in front of the train. And the train ran over my legs. I lost both of my legs underneath that train. And I remember every bit of it. I was not unconscious. And I remember I didn't feel any pain, thankfully. I remember someone arriving on the scene, speaking into my ear. I thought they were praying or giving me my last rites or something. And next thing I heard was the paramedics were there and they were like, we need to start tourniquets now. And then I was out. But what led the police officer to the scene was my mom was nervous Nellie, and she wanted to know why I hadn't shown up. She was scared, and I had her car. And so she called my husband in Colorado. And he's like, well, I don't know where she's at. But he looked down at his phone. He's like, I've got the Find My Phone app or the Find My app. And he's like, she's at this intersection. So my mom called the police got there. And that's why there was such a quick response, because the train driver didn't even see me. So I probably would have died if it were for those actions of my mom and my husband, and the quick response of the police and the paramedic team. I don't know how long I was unconscious, or probably a day or two. But I do remember waking up in the ICU, and I had a big tube thing down my throat. I couldn't talk, but well, back up. My husband was there. Friends, neighbors, family rallied around to get him on the first flight out. He got a call hearing, your wife has lost her legs. We don't know if she's going to live. And I can't imagine. I know we went through so much. I mean, my whole family did. And we've always talked about suicide in our family as a very selfish thing to do. And it is. It is. But anyway, my husband was there in the ICU, and I saw him, and I just wanted to communicate to him. And since I couldn't talk, they gave me a pen and paper, and I said, I haven't given up. And that was very profound, because here I just tried to end my life, and yet I woke up wanting to live, wanting to fight, and wanting to survive. And that's pretty much been my theme since I woke up in that ICU unit, is that I haven't given up, and I'm not going to give up. um, but anyway, I had lost 90% of my blood. They had to give me multiple blood transfusions, a couple of surgeries to amputate my legs. So I am a bilateral above the knee amputee. My limbs, residual limbs, are very short. They're only about 4 inches, what's left of them. And the surgeon did an amazing job at putting the pieces back together. And I healed very quickly. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital. I had a very positive, I didn't wake up thinking, oh my God, my life's, now what? But it was just like, okay, this is what we got. And I was trying to be strong for my husband, for my family. And my husband was doing major gymnastics with text groups, keeping everybody informed back at home. So anyway, I spent 3 weeks in the hospital. I healed really quickly, and then there was a big drama about how they were going to get me back to Colorado, and we were longing to be home. And so the thanks to COVID, there was a driver shortage, so they couldn't hire an ambulance driver. We tried medevac. It was too expensive. So my husband's just like, I'm going to drive her, You just figure out how to get her in the truck, and I'll drive her back straight through. And it was the longest drive of his life and my life, because we couldn't stop. He couldn't get me out of the vehicle.
Right.
I had wound vacs on, and I was doped up on oxycodone or whatever with pain meds, but got me into Colorado safe and sound. I went into rehab. I worked hard at inpatient rehab, and Jerry knows how hard I work.
True.
When they said, you're going to need to be strong to go home, I took that very literally. So got strong enough, came home, and oh my gosh, coming home was a shock to my system. It was like, I didn't know how to do anything. I'm in a wheelchair. We had to modify our house, but I just took it one day at a time, and just hard times. My family went through quite a grieving stage at that point in time, with me being home and seeing the reality of what they were going to be faced with. And it hit everyone really hard. I was focused on just how to function day in and day out. I became very selfish, because I had to think everything through and figure out how to do this and that. And everybody kept saying, Rochelle, you need to get a good therapist. And I'm like, yeah, all right, And so I was very fortunate. I was referred to an amazing trauma therapist here in Colorado Springs. And I couldn't I could have traveled to him. My husband could have taken me, but he was in a facility that didn't have ADA accessibility. So we decided to do therapy over Zoom or FaceTime, whatever we used. And he was a lifesaver to me, because the big focus was, we need to focus on what led you to those train tracks in the first place. You know, we knew alcohol was part of the problem, but there was stuff that was brewing
Yeah.
underneath that needed to be addressed.
Yeah.
And
Usually alcohol is the lubricant, but not the problem.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And the alcohol gave me the courage to follow through with what I did, because had
Or,
I
yeah.
not been drinking, I never would have done that. Um, but anyway, it was interesting that as I worked with him, all of my past traumas came to the surface,
Mm,
which I read the book, The Body Keeps Score.
yeah.
Uh,
That's the Vanderkolk.
yeah, it's kind of a hard one to get through, but it has some really good points, and it does. It's so true. The body remembers trauma, and when you go through trauma, all these come rushing back to the surface, which was actually a good thing, because there were a lot of things I hadn't dealt with those past traumas,
Mm-hmm.
which was fertile ground for working with my therapist.
Or,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you said that underlying, and I'm personally of the belief that um, if you find people who are feeling, like you, or hopeless or in despair, or usually if you dig around, the underlying similarity is almost always shame. I
Hmm.
mean, shame is like the universal emotional poison, right?
Hmm.
People can, in the absence of shame, in my opinion, in the absence of shame, um, people can overcome almost any grief, sadness, embarrassment,
Hmm.
regret, whatever is there, they
Hmm.
can deal with. But it's shame that drives us. And so, you know, I don't even know what the previous traumas were or what you went. I mean, I'm saying that for the people listening. I don't have insight into what happened. I knew this story, but I
Hmm.
don't have insight to what came before. But what I would say is, um, those events, those previous unresolved trauma, adverse childhood experience, things like that, probably set the table for this,
Hmm.
because somebody who had a different history, and somebody who didn't have previous trauma, or who had resolved previous
Hmm.
trauma,
Hmm.
might have fallen off the wagon, been on the Zoom call with their daughter, been caught drinking, and sort of admitted that they'd slipped and rectified it, gone and got some help. But that shame reaction is
Hmm.
usually one that comes from somebody who has previous trauma and
Yeah.
unresolved adversity. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't
Trauma, and
surprise
I
me
would,
that that all came up.
yeah, trauma and fear, underlying fear.
Right.
Fear was a big driver for me.
Sure.
Um, so, so anyway, I worked for like 9 months with this trauma therapist, and um, so correct me if I'm wrong. I thought I had PTSD, but listening to one of your episodes recently, you mentioned uh, what was it? Im, I wrote it down here. Something acute stress disorder.
Disorder, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if it was what it was classified was
Yeah.
as, but
Yeah.
what
Well,
I
if it was 9 months later, it was PTSD. What
okay.
what differentiates those essentially is the time period. When a trauma happens, like from the day of the train incident,
Mm-hmm.
for 2 weeks after that, we would call it acute stress disorder. If it
Uh,
persists longer than that, it becomes PTSD.
Okay. Well, anyway, he did need to work with me on some PTSD, because
Yeah.
every night I would go to bed and close my eyes, I would see the train going over me,
Yeah.
and all the
Right.
sounds and things hitting me. And I was just so impressed. We did some EMDR.
MDR. Yeah.
Um, And I'm telling you, it cleared it for me because I lay down, I can think about it and still it's not an issue for me, you know.
Mm,
So there's a lot of beauty in therapy. I'm a big proponent of encouraging people to get help if they need help.
mhm,
Um, so during that, right about that 9-month period, I was healed up enough. I had the wound vacs off. I really wanted to get back into AA. And that was about the time I, uh, I learned how to drive with hand controls.
mhm,
I wanted to gain my independence back. That was a biggie for me. I probably could have started back to AA sooner, but it was just one more thing I was going to have to ask my husband to do for me or someone else. And I already felt like I was a burden to everyone, needing so much help. So once I was able to start driving, the first place I went was back to AA. And the community I landed with is my family. I mean, they are amazing. They have helped me um, embrace that shame, you know, and to be able to embrace my fears and admit that I'm powerless, you know, that I didn't have control over my drinking. And
mm,
I've worked through the steps. I have an amazing sponsor that I love dearly that I work with. So that's been a big part of my journey. Community has become a really big part of my healing journey as well. Not only the AA community, but I got involved with the amputee coalition that hooked me up with a peer support person that lived in Texas. I phone called with her, asked all the questions that I needed to ask, and she invited me to Empower Fest amputee conference. That first, it was probably about 13, not quite 13, no, it was probably 10, 12, 11 months into my recovery. And I went by myself, stubborn as I was. I didn't want
mhm,
anybody to go. I wanted to fly, show everybody I was going to survive, that I could fly on my own. Went to this conference in Austin, Texas, and it was life-changing for me. I mean, really life-changing. I mean, I was surrounded by 100 other amputees of varying limb loss, and to hear them share their stories about how they had lost their limbs and how they were navigating life. And um, it just meant so much to me. And mm, it still means a lot to me. I'm still connected
yeah.
with all my amputee peeps, and now I'm becoming an amputee conference junkie. I've traveled to 4 conferences now since then. So again, community has played a big role in me finding support and finding just the motivation to keep going because it's been hard. It's been the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but I'm not ashamed of being an amputee. I show my limbs off, I wear shorts and
Mhm,
but I knew I wanted to start walking. I really had a passion because of being at that amputee conference. There were people walking that were bilateral amputees on prosthetics. And I'm like, if they can do it, I can do it. And I had already been fitted for my first set of prosthetics. They were little short stubbies, which they start most bilaterals in, with the socket that fits up over the limb. And I worked so hard trying to learn how to walk in those stubbies. And because my limbs are so short, the socket would twist when I'd take, multiple steps. And then I'd have to sit down, take the socket off, put it back on, get it lined up upright. And I got so frustrated. It was just, I spent more time taking the things on and off than I did walking. So my prosthetist knew about a new procedure that was being done in the United States, which had just gotten FDA approval about 7 years ago. It's called osseointegration. And he told me about a physician in a surgeon in Denver that was doing it, and that I should maybe go in for an evaluation, see if I was a candidate for it. So I went in, and he thought I was an excellent candidate based on that I was in good health. I used to be active. I'm small. I'm not overweight. Didn't have health issues like diabetes and all that. So what osseointegration is, I decided to go forward with it after doing lots of research. It's a bone-anchored system that they put a titanium rod in the femur and then close you up and you heal for 3 months. And it's kind of like a tooth implant. The bone and the titanium rods start to solidify together, fuse, yeah. And so I had that done. I didn't have any complications. And so that was stage 1 surgery. And then the stage 2 surgery was just January of this year. They opened me back up and put an external abutment, which screwed into that rod. And that abutment is the metal that sticks. I have a metal piece about this big that sticks out of the end of my leg. And that's what the prosthetic hooks onto. So it eliminates the socket. It's a direct bone connection, prosthetic connection. I got that all mixed up. Anyway, so I just had the stage 2 done, but I knew during that process of getting the surgeries done, I needed to get really strong. I knew I needed to have a strong core and strong upper body to just get around day in and day out. So that's when I came to Jerry about a year ago, September. And I said, do your magic, make me strong. My goal is I want to be able to walk someday. And we have worked hard on that, haven't we?
Yes, ma'am, we have. And we continue to do so.
What's that?
And we continue to do so.
And we continue to do so, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, our sessions are not only strength building, but they're also emotional support sessions because I bring my problems in with me once in a while and sneak in a free therapy session with Jerry.
Yeah, and your fitness coach happens to be a doctor of psychology.
Exactly,
so,
exactly. Yeah. Yes, yeah.
So you've also done a few things. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
You talked about having a mentor in Texas, but you've since become a peer mentor.
Yes, I have, and that's been one of the things I wanted to do after learning about peer mentors. They had a peer mentor training program, and I was getting so much value out of it. I wanted to be able to give back to other new amputees, and so I went through the local chapter here, their peer mentor program. So my prosthetic clinic, when they get a new amputee that's just been amputated, women primarily, they'll give me a call and say, hey, can you go visit her? And so I'm working with 2 amputees right now, and they help me just as much as I help them. Definitely.
Great.
So let's see, where was I? So anyway, I had the stage 2 surgery The next stage was to start doing weight bearing, to get the bone and the rod strong enough to handle walking. And weight bearing is just basically standing on your legs, standing, timing it. You know, first it was 2 minutes I could tolerate, then I was up to 5 minutes. And then, well, even before that, I wasn't even allowed to put 100% of my weight on my limbs. It was, you know, at definite little increments, you know, building up to that. So during that time of weight bearing, my dear mama she had been diagnosed with cancer, and her cancer was getting bad. And so I was cleared by my surgeon to make a trip back to see her, because I thought it might be the last time I saw her. Well, little did I know, my mama, every time I came back, it just perked up like a little Energizer bunny. So I'd stay, visit for a while, and then I'd come back and get working on my legs. And then the next month, I thought she'd be going downhill, so I'd go back. Well, this went on for like 4 months, back and forth, which really slowed down my process of doing the weight bearing and training I needed to do on my legs. But it was important to me to be there for my mom, and because she was getting close to her final days. And my sister health had not been good as well. And during that time visiting my mom, my sister passed away, and unexpectedly. And I'm just like, oh God, you know. We were the little threesome family unit. My mom raised my sister and I all by herself as a nurse, you know, working long hours and trying to make ends meet. And I was the adult child in the family, and my sis leaves, and my mom hasn't even passed yet. So I went through the grieving process of losing my sister, and trying to help her partner, and flying back and forth from Illinois to Colorado. And then finally my mom passed in May, on Mother's Day. Yeah, rest her soul. And then I was able to have a beautiful memorial service for the two of them in June. And it's really been just since June that I've really been able to get back into really working hard on this whole walking thing.
Yeah.
So I took my I just celebrated my 2-year anniversary, 2-year alive day, 2-year sobriety date, August 13th. And I can't be, I'm so happy. I mean, as tragic as that day was 2 years ago, I'm so pleased with where I'm at now. I was just at an amputee conference last week, an amputee boot camp, and there was a very good friend of mine that is also a train wreck. Little joke, pun intended. He
Very tasteful, Rochelle.
he's a huge ambassador at our conferences, but he coined the phrase and the theme for our last conference. We're tragic to magic,
Yeah.
and it was a tragic event that took place 2 years ago, but there's a lot of magic going on. So yeah, I just did my first runway walk at about 2 years, a live day, and I'm went to the boot camp and putting on my little stubbies. Everybody's in these little short, little 12-inch stubby prosthetic legs waddling around, but it builds the strength in the hips and the butt and everything that you need to back to get your limbs going, where you need them to go, because I don't have much muscle left in my limbs. So anyway, that was very powerful. And you taught me something really important in one of our training sessions about, I've just been focusing on, and my goal is I just want to walk. I just want to walk. And my takeaway from, I can't remember how you put it, but you told me there's just so much more, that it's walking is not an end goal, is not your end goal, Rochelle. And I took that to heart. I really did. And I've just really been trying to take this journey at whatever pace it's at, and enjoying the joy in the journey. And I got to share that with so many of my amputee friends, and it really meant a lot to them. And
Yeah.
I got
I
that
think
one
I
for
think
you.
I remember that conversation. It was, the gist was just, you were so focused on that goal. I was concerned
Yeah.
that you might end up, you know, depressed, or I'm trying to think of the word, um a little disenfranchised after achieving that goal, because it's like, well, you
Mhm.
get there and there's a great celebration and it's great, now I can walk, and now what, right? There's still a lot of life to live,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know. And
Yeah.
so
I know.
um yeah, so I'm gonna cheat a little bit because I have some insider knowledge, but
Yeah.
so I know in those 4 months you were running back and forth from Colorado to Illinois and visiting your mom.
Mhm.
During one of those trips, you took your daughter with you and had some emotional healing.
Yes. Yes. Well, I actually trying to think. Both of my daughters went back with me for when we did the memorial service,
Right.
and that was a really special time, because going back to Illinois was going right back to the scene of where all
Mhm.
took place. I mean, we were in a hotel within a block of where I lost my legs, and and I believe it was a necessary part of the healing journey, with my two daughters, to see where I came from, what, they had been back there under other circumstances, but just to kind of, I shared with them where it all took place and where I was at, and that I was able to stand there and watch a train go by the hotel we were staying in.
Mm.
And yeah, that was very special. And they each played a role in the memorial service for my mom and sister. Um, my sister and I had met back in Illinois, uh, well, it was probably about 15 months into my healing journey. She was barely well enough to get back there, but during that time, I was able to make amends to my mom, make amends to my sister, because I'd been working the 12-step program.
Mhm.
And so when both of them passed, I knew it was good. They had forgiven me, for what had taken place. So, yeah, it was very special. Um, I have one more thing to share that's very special to me. During this past 2 years of healing, my relationship with my husband took a really hard hit, as you can imagine, with a trauma of this magnitude. Um, he was on his healing journey. I was on mine. We did do quite a bit of marriage counseling together. Um, but I had thought at the 2 year point, oh my gosh, we're not going to make it, And I was trying to imagine what life was going to be like as a single woman. But it's just been since that 2 year marker point, our relationship has had a huge turnaround. Um, we have both found a place of acceptance and love towards each other, and been working really hard on our communication skills
Yeah.
and um, and just allowing each other space to heal at our own space.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to make it. I think we're going to make it, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that is pretty exciting. And you know, I was present to hear about a lot of that
Hmm.
as it went on, a lot of the difficulty and a lot of the improvement.
Hmm.
And you know, uh what stood out to me, what's inspiring to me, and because this is not an easy thing to do, but you know, you and he had established a pattern, right? Most of us have patterns, right? You have
Hmm.
people in your life, whether it's a spouse or a parent or a sibling, that you can, you know, if there's about to be a disagreement or an argument, you know the pattern so well that you could almost um, play both roles, right? And then say what I'm going to say and what they're going to say and what I'm going to say and what they're going to say, right? The pattern is so
Yeah.
predictable.
Hmm.
And whenever there's a pattern like that, however many people are involved in that pattern, everybody plays a role in perpetuating it, right? Everyone does.
Hmm.
And what you did, which was, in my opinion, incredibly courageous and really inspiring, is you identified, you know, when things were difficult, you could easily identify all kinds of things that he was doing to make them difficult, right? And how you were
Hmm.
trying to help make them better. And I think that's normal. Most of us could always say, well, I'm trying to be a reasonable person, and this other, you know, my partner, my sibling, my whatever won't, you know, cooperate. But you were able to step back and sort of say, okay, what is my role? How do I perpetuate the pattern? Even though I'm trying to do right things and trying to be a good spouse and a good wife, and what am I doing to perpetuate this pattern? And
Hmm.
then you, in no uncertain terms and in a very, you know, profound way, interrupted the pattern.
Hmm.
And of course, he played, you know, he participated in things improving with you. He chose to interrupt the
Hmm.
pattern with you. He could have chosen not to, but he chose to.
Right. Hmm.
But, you know, but things are better because you evaluated what was happening over and over again and found a way to interrupt that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's important, especially, you know, anybody who's listening or watching this podcast. That's the thing I want them to hear, because how many times do we find ourselves in the same circumstances over and
I
over and
know.
over?
I know.
And right, and you know, I did a podcast at one point where I said it was sort of like, you know, I've in my life I've made this mistake so many times. You know, I've um, you know, dated people, for example, and um, it would go bad. You know, we were not a good, ended up not being a good pair, and it would go bad for some sort of reason. Then I'd find the next person to date and focus on all these ways that that person was different, how this was going to be different, right? This person's so different. And then in 3 months, I was in the same situation, same fucking situation again, right?
Hmm.
And I couldn't figure out how. How was I in that same situation? But then I'd get out of that situation and going into the next situation. This time it's going to be so different, right?
Hmm.
And I say, you know, in my mind, it's like if I start, you know, overeating, you know, chocolate ice cream every day, I'm just eating gallons and gallons of chocolate ice cream. And I get to the point where it's making me sick and I'm gaining weight and I'm diabetic and right. And I'm having health
Hmm.
problems. I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to get away from this chocolate ice cream. I can't do this anymore. It's so bad for me. And so I
Hmm.
start coming home with vanilla ice cream. And I think of all the ways that vanilla is different from chocolate, right? Vanilla is so different. It's so much better. But then sure enough, 3 months down the road, I'm sick on vanilla ice cream again. And
Hmm.
so then I go back to the store and I come home with mint chocolate chip because it's so different from chocolate, so different from vanilla. And I end up sick on it, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, for things to change, I've got to become a person who no longer comes home with ice cream.
Right. Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Like period dot.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you find yourself, and I say this for the benefit of people who might watch or listen to this, and this is a lesson I learned the hard way, and you learned it you know, Ruth, I got to watch you do it, which was so cool. But, um, you know, you can either, when you're in this pattern, you know, when you're stuck in this terrible relationship with a sibling or a parent or a partner or a spouse or even a coworker or a boss, and it
Mhm.
just keeps repeating over and over, you can certainly, it's an option to keep doing the same thing you always do and hope that the other person will change.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
you're probably going to end up disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes quite a bit more courage and quite a bit of resolve. It's really terrifying and takes
Takes
a
a
lot of courage
Oh, yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
to look hard in the
I
mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My sponsor, I had asked her to help me work through just a fear inventory because there was a lot of fears coming up, you know, in my relationship. And, um, and at one point she said, Rochelle, you're being a victim. I'm like, I'm not being the victim. I'm not playing the victim role, you know? And the more we dove into that, and the more I really looked at myself,
Right.
um, you know, it was like things aren't going to change unless I do something different.
Yeah.
And what I had to do different was to be courageous and face the fear of what was holding me back. And the
Yeah.
fear was the big thing that I had to break through.
Yeah.
Um,
And what I know from talking to you at those times is that you were trying some different things.
yes,
But,
I was. Hmm.
right, but all of the things you were trying were different flavors of,
Pussyfooting around.
well, different flavors of ice cream, right? They
Yeah.
were different approaches to being a victim, right? Instead of being this type of victim, I'm being this type of victim. And instead of
Hmm.
this type of, right? So they were, you know, qualitatively different. You were changing things,
Hmm.
but you weren't ready yet to change the underlying theme,
Yeah.
right? You weren't ready yet. You were sort of changing your approach to him, hoping that that would inspire him to undo the
Hmm.
pattern,
Right. Right.
right? It took several iterations of that to get
Yeah.
to a point where you said, well, the hell with it, I'm going to undo the
Yeah.
pattern.
Yeah.
And then thankfully he chose to work with you on that.
Well, and he was doing a lot of work. He's been working on himself for as long as I've known him,
Yeah.
just to at varying degrees,
Yeah.
and he had really been working hard to find, you know, some peace, some acceptance, and to find um, just a new way of life himself. And it's because we both put in the work that I think that we were able to come out on the other side of
Right.
this without a divorce. So,
Yeah. And in order to do that, in order to do the work, right, you have to, you know, I always say, and I've said on other content I've put out that, um, you know, sometimes it's nice when people say, well, don't be afraid, but sometimes there's nothing you can do about it, right? Sometimes you're
hmm.
afraid, period.
Hmm.
And you have to just do the fucking thing anyway.
Hmm.
You just have to do it scared,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that was the thing. You guys were very familiar with your pattern. And in order to make the pattern change, right, the unknown is terrifying. Who knows if what we do next will work or make things
Yeah.
worse or make things better?
Yeah.
But you just gotta choose to press on and see, you know, even
Yeah.
if you're afraid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So I had to face another fear, you know, at my amputee boot camp is that fear of falling. And
mm,
as they keep increasing the length of my legs, you know, something we've been working on,
mhm,
you know, are falling, you know, how to
yeah,
fall safely, you know, and
yeah,
jujitsu. Um, I'm aware this fear is really can be a something that holds amputees back from walking without forearm crutches or without canes after they've, you know, developed the skill of walking. But
yeah,
that fear of letting go, and I'm going to keep that in the forefront that, I need to work through that fear and make sure I know how to fall safely.
Right. Right.
But fear is a big underlying, it
Yeah.
goes way back for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't need to get into this rabbit hole right now, but there's what pops into my mind is um, there could be many fears for somebody who's a double, bilateral amputee learning to walk on prosthetics. And some of those fears are pretty legitimate, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
fear of getting hurt if you fall,
Mhm.
right? And fear of, you know, um, hurting yourself badly, right?
Or
Um,
dislodging the implant
right.
in my
That's what I'm,
femur.
yeah,
Oh,
right.
yeah.
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 Um, but then there could also be, and I don't know how, like I said, we don't need to go down this rabbit hole now. This is something, you can dig through with your sponsor or with a therapist, but there's also maybe, you had talked already about the power of shame and the power of things of that sort. And there's the fear of being a spectacle, of being embarrassed, right? If you fall in
Mhm.
public.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That could,
that I would call, that's a fear that's probably, less necessary, right?
yeah.
Than
Yeah.
the fear of hurting yourself, Some
Yeah.
fears are worth listening to, and some fears,
Exactly.
yeah. I always say you can feel fear. That's okay. You just don't want to, any of your emotions. You should feel all of your emotions.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
a psychologist. I'm in favor of people feeling their emotions. I just don't think you should let them drive the car.
hmm
You know,
hmm Yeah. Yeah. I
yeah.
agree. I agree. Yeah.
So, Rochelle, it's such a remarkable story, and what I would love to, if we could wrap up on this idea, one of the things I try to present in my content is a realistic view of what thriving, what a life of personal growth and of thriving looks like after a trauma or an adversity. And you have survived I'm going to speak for a lot of people, what probably a lot of people would think of as an unimaginable trauma.
hmm
Um, and people who see you in the gym, people who see you, um, I happen to know, I know it's Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm not supposed to know, but people have come up to me and told me they know you from there. And
hmm
so I know other people who know you from outside the gym. And, by everyone's estimation, except your own, you're a truly remarkable human being. But
Thank
what does life look like now, as 2 years later, as you are building this life of thriving?
What does it look like? Well, there's hard days still. um, but I break down those hard days into manageable little bites. One thing I've learned in my program is if I'm really struggling, I need to turn it over to my higher power. Um, I'm very quick to reach out and ask for help and support and talk through things that I might be going through. um, but I'm pretty happy in general. I'm trying to balance not only my physical, but my spiritual and my emotional health. And I try to find something really positive or something that I'm really grateful for every day, or at least
Yeah.
a few things. Um, I've been practicing some yoga, not as regularly as I would like, but just to get me out of myself. And I'm eating well, taking good care of my body. What else is going on? I'm being very vulnerable. I'm willing to share my story with
Yeah.
anybody that asks. I believe honesty and vulnerability are huge in the growth process.
They're the antidote for shame.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So what
And
I hear,
I reach out.
yeah,
I reach out to other amputees, and provide support. And I'm
yeah,
also reaching out and helping in my community, because service is really big. And
yeah,
service is one of the things that when things aren't going well inside, you need to just get out of yourself and go
yeah,
help somebody. And that's been a big part of the
yeah,
recipe of success too.
yeah. And so one of the tricky parts about um, presenting content and being a coach and helping people try to create lives of thriving is we have these different tools, but of course they're not rigid. Things don't fit cleanly, right? Everybody's an individual.
Hmm.
But I do hear, for example, what you just said about service, about being a peer mentor to other amputees, to being of service to other people in recovery from
Hmm.
uh, substance use problems, is what sounds to me like meaning making, right? Making
Hmm.
meaning out of what you've been through.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. And
Hmm.
you certainly talked about mindfulness, right? With
Hmm.
yoga practice, and I know you use a meditation app
Oh,
sometimes.
yes. I love the Insight Timer. Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then you talked about gratitude.
Hmm.
I've heard that you are learning more self-compassion.
Yes.
Yeah,
Working on that. Yes.
working on that. And then,
It's a
of
work in
course,
progress.
it's all a work in progress, right?
Yes.
And
Hmm.
if you're not a work in progress anymore, it probably means you've died, right? You should always
Yeah,
be a
exactly. I
progress.
love that saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I heard physical fitness, and of course,
Oh,
I've been privileged to be a part of that. And there's nutrition in there, and there's right,
hmm.
lots of
Hmm.
so so I think what I love to present to people, the idea is that I think when people experience trauma and they experience adversity, there's this idea that it's going to be there forever.
Mm.
Unfortunately, there's some truth in that. It will be there forever. It's part of your history, right? It's what you've lived through. You will probably always remember it. You started off by saying some days are harder than others, right?
Hmm.
And the idea is it may be there forever, but it doesn't have to be there the way that people imagine, right?
Yeah.
Yes, there are bad days. There might be days that feel sad or gut wrenching or heartbreaking or um, fearful or all of these things. But as people use these, put these other tools together, these mindfulness and gratitude and fitness, um, a couple things happen in my experience. And so hopefully this fits with your experience.
Hmm.
First of all, those bad days start to spread out. There's fewer and fewer of them.
Hmm.
Second of all, when they do occur, the intensity is dialed down a little. They're not nearly as bad as they used to be. They're
Yeah.
still bad, but they're not like they used to be.
Yeah.
But the real kicker for me, what I've seen in people, what I've experienced in my own life with my own trauma, is the days in between those bad days are so much better
Oh,
than
yeah.
any days I've ever had before in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Yeah. That brings tears to my eyes because life is beautiful on this side. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
is. Yeah. Mm.
Well, Rochelle, before we wrap things up, do you have any final thoughts or punctuation you want to put on this
Anything I've
discussion?
forgotten? Not that I can think of off the top of my head. I've covered a lot.
Yes, you have.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say
Never give
personally,
up.
yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, I want to say personally, thank you for coming on and sharing
Hmm.
your story. And even if you had chosen not to come on and share your story, I want to thank you for your friendship and for just I think it's a privilege for me to know you, and I want you to know that I love you and I adore you.
Oh, well,
So
thank you. I love you too.
And I want to thank everyone who chose to watch or listen to this podcast. I know that your time is your most valuable commodity, and I am ever grateful when you choose to spend it with me. And so thank you so much for that. For anyone who would like to get in touch with Rochelle, if you have questions or comments, we're not going to share Rochelle's personal contact information, but you can get a hold of me. Either you can email me at Jerry dot, so Jerry dot growthandthriving.com, I'm sorry, Jerry dot growthandthriving, all spelled out, at gmail.com. So Jerry dot growthandthriving@gmail.com. Or you can message me on any of the socials. I have not a Growth and Thriving, I have a Biker Psychologist Instagram, a Biker Psychologist TikTok. There is a Growth and Thriving Facebook page, and there are a couple of groups on Facebook you can look into, which are Growth and Thriving After Hardship and Adversity, Parenting After Adversity, and Leadership Skills for Badass Survivors. So message me on any of those, and I will forward your messages on to Rochelle, and she will get back in touch with you however she chooses to do so. And if you like the content, of course, please subscribe, like, and share. Love to hear your comments. Please share this with people in your lives.
Yeah.
And until next time, Dr. Jerry Sunshine Novak, the Biker Psychologist, saying keep growing until you're thriving.